I've lived in the Shire since I was probably 16 years old. I came across the bridge from Sans Souci. And look, in some ways when I went to art school it was problematic because being white toast boy from here, created a few problems. And it was probably because I wasn't really comfortable in my own skin. But after a while, living here for 30 odd years, it's just who I am and what I am. The work that I make is to do with my experience of place. I surf and I fish, and me being interested in nature and how it fits together, its machinations, is probably a product of me growing up in this area. One of the most profound experiences I ever had in relationship to me as an artist and Australian landscape was seeing a Rover Thomas show in the National Gallery of Australia about 1995. The work moved me so much because it was such a honest and real extrapolation of place. And the flatness in the paintings reminded me of modern painting like Matisse or, late Western abstraction. So I sat in the drive 3 hours back home thinking, well, how am I going to make work that has this sense of validity or this sense of place or this sense of realness? People label me as an abstract painter, and the work will end up as an abstraction of something, but everything comes from the drawing. I make drawings from looking at real things, whether it be stones, rocks, bits of things washed up from the ocean. Joseph Beuys said, drawing is thinking, and that's what it is for me. So I'll wander around in the desert, landscape, beach, whatever, and I'll find things and just draw them. And what I do is I'll fall in love with a subject, say the whale stuff. I was lucky enough to visit Albany Whaling Museum, and I drew from the bones. I didn't draw the whales themselves, I just drew bones. And then I started making sculpture, I started making prints, started making paintings to try and decipher what those bones meant in relationship to me, the landscape, the whaling station itself. And I ended up making a whole body of work to do with whaling and the whaling stations. I didn't really set out to work in 15 different media, but what I do enjoy is collaborating with people. So I find if I work with someone like the printmaker I work with, Brenda Ty, who's been fantastic, it brings something new and something different to the work. I have to fall in love with something. So the spider work came about by me visiting Lake Mungo in about 2000, 2001. And one morning I'm driving students through the desert, across this salt bush, this little plateau, and the salt bush lit up because of the dew on it. And what happened was the dew then was reflecting on the spider webs, and it was incredibly beautiful. So I threw the students out of the car and I came back and I just drew these spider webs. I just drew them, put them away for 4 or 5 years, then pulled them out and thought, these are incredibly evocative and lovely. I want to make some work with it. One of the strangest bodies of work that I've made is a group of paintings, drawings and sculpture to do with the winged victory figure. It's called Samothrace, and it's one of the most famous pieces of sculpture in Western history, and it's in the Louvre in Paris. And I saw it first about 22 years ago on my first overseas trip, as you do as a student. I went and looked at this sculpture, and everyone knows it's a late Greek sculpture they dug up on an island outside of Greece. It's incredibly beautiful, but what I did was I fell in love with a fragment, the hand of it, and the hand's about 3 or 4 times the size of a normal human hand, and it was the broken, fragmentary nature. It was missing a couple of fingers, but I didn't draw it. It was only about 4 years ago that I went back, and the objects, this is interesting, the objects are the same, but I'd changed, and I actually spent 3 or 4 hours drawing it, which was hilarious in the Louvre. I thought I was going to get arrested. No one spoke to me, questioned me, and there was charcoal all over the floor, and I was just drawing this hand in a box. And again, I had no idea what I was going to do with the things, the drawings, but I knew I just wanted to draw it. And it was quite problematic after that of how to then make some painting to do with another artwork. And I found that really interesting, that conundrum of painting someone else's work, an unknown artist, Greek artist that made this thing. One of the smart things that I actually did as a painter was I tend to work in different media, and I'm process driven. And what I mean by process driven is once I've got a story, I filter it through different media, and I want the media, like painting, drawing, sculpture, whatever I'm using, to show me something I haven't seen before. Like the painting Origin Bloom, it's made on Belgian linen, so I stretch the linen myself, prepare the linen, and then what I'll do is put a scheme or a kind of diagram in acrylic. And in this particular painting is a stone. It's just a simple stone form, and it's got a grid behind the stone form. And that was me using ink in a kind of mapping way. It's longitude and latitude lines about how Western people came to the desert and started chopping up bits of land. And then I've smashed this stone form very quickly in acrylic over the top. Then it's got an oil glaze over the top of that. So it's me sandwiching and layering ideas and pictorial form together to try and make a sense of those bits of information. But what happens with the glaze, it will soak into the linen. So it's not a really traditional way of working. It's almost like working with batik or something. And it throws up, the way I work, throws up things I don't expect. So I might plan out an idea and have a structure, but the painting will then throw something back at me and I have to react to that. And I really enjoy that. If you spend time with Aboriginal people like I have, Badger Bates, who's a Wilcannia Barkindji elder, you walk with Badger around country out near Broken Hill, and he'll see things or point out things to you that you wouldn't have even considered. So it's like a new paradigm. It's a new way of seeing things. And once you start taking on those little things, simple things like, from a Renaissance point of view, we're used to looking at things foreground, midground, background, about linear perspective, vanishing point perspective. You look at Aboriginal painting or Aboriginal artists, they don't give us stuff about that. It's more about a layering of imagery and a layering of meaning. Then how do I as an artist make work in relationship to that, and where do I fit in between? And a lovely way of talking about that is lying around a campfire one night with Badger Bates. This would be almost 20 years ago. And we're looking at the Milky Way, big skies out in the desert, you know, the stars almost hit you on the head. And he's going, "Can you see the emu?" And I'm looking at it and I can't see the emu. And what I'm trying to do is join the dots together, like in a drawing book. And Badger goes, "No, look at the negative space in the Milky Way." And sure enough, here's this bloody emu, negative shape, running across the Milky Way. So there's a profound shift there. Just last year, I went on an artist trip to Fowler's Gap, University's research station, and I actually built my own little sculptures because we took 12 other artists and they all ran out into the desert to paint the view or work with the landscape in some way. And I stuck to the station and I built these little fragile sculptures, you know, with twine, hot glue, stone, twigs. And what I then did was draw them. I took them outside, so I was actually working plein air, but I was working plein air with still life. And I made the drawings, then made these little pictures using the colour of the landscape and the objects themselves. This is one of the drawings that I then turned into a painting, and it's basically one of the little structures that I built, but it's the shadow and it's the structure itself. And I've layered those two things, one over the top of each other, and it kind of gives us information about the thing, but in a slightly reversed or topsy-turvy way. And then literally it's taking the shapes of this sculpture from the drawing and banging it in the painting, and not over-intellectualising it, basically just grabbing the information and putting it on the painting and interpreting it in a different media. And that actually gives you, a different kind of texture or the feeling of that stone thing without it necessarily looking exactly like the thing. I think that evocation or that transformation is really important. The kind of work that I make, or the artwork that I'm interested in, usually has big contrasts. Also, I like textures to be very big or amplified. So often in my painting, you'll see something that's troweled on or palette knifed on to be quite thick. And that's a literal interpretation of a rocky surface or a piece of timber, me trying to come up with some evocative way of using paint. And then I think, for me, in the same painting, it should have something that's very flat or very transparent. And that gives you an experience of, being outside, because you've got the sky, you've got the earth, you've got these huge, big differences in place and land, so you've got to try and get those in the pictures as well.